Hello, and welcome to the Market Bull podcast. Please note, topics and stocks discussed in this podcast are not financial or investment advice. Today on the show, I spoke with Shaun Wade, the CEO of Power Metal Resources, which is listed on the London Stock Exchange under code POW. Power Metal Resources is not your traditional mining company. It has a portfolio currently across 4 countries with a range of projects addressing key commodities for the future. An incubator for shareholder value. Shaun on the show talked about the projects, the countries, and the commodities the company is looking at. He also explained the company's structure, the team that is involved, and how they manage the various projects across the globe. Shaun also looked at the plan for the next 6 to 12 months and what investors can expect coming from the company. I hope you enjoy listening. So hello and welcome to the Market Bull podcast. I'm your host, Ben Kostrich, and joining me on the show today is Shaun Wade, the CEO of Power Metal Resources. It's listed in London and he's flown over from the UK, not just to speak with me, I assure you of that. Welcome to the show, Shaun.
Thanks very much, Ben. Thanks for having me.
So give us a little bit of a backstory of yourself, because I know it's a relatively new role you've taken on here, but you've got a bit of a story clearly to be in the position you are now. So yeah, talk to us about yourself.
Yeah, thanks very much. Well, I'm a finance guy, Ben, by background. I started my career back in the early 1990s at Cazenove, which some of your listeners may have heard of. It's a well-known London stockbroking firm. And I was there for 14 years. And a lot of that time was spent helping mining companies get financing and also stockbroking generally to institutional investors, both in the UK and elsewhere in the world. So I think that gave me a reasonable background in what investors are looking for in their investments. I then moved on to another firm. I was one of the founding shareholders at Liberum Capital. And in total, I was in the city for about 20 years. But for the last 10 years or so, I've been mainly in the mining sector, more on the corporate side. I've had a number of roles in investor relations and business development, where essentially I've been helping mining companies deliver their story to the market and helping them get finance. So I think from that point of view, when I look at the Power Metal model, I think I bring a skill set to the business, which essentially helps us to build our network of investors and advisors and capital providers more generally.
And I've spoken with a few involved in not necessarily Power Metal Resources, but a few of the offshoots of what the company is, because it's quite, I've never come across a company that's doing this sort of projects and the way it's structured. So can you explain a little bit about what the structure of the company is?
Absolutely. I think the best way to describe it really, and a way that I think investors will be familiar with, is as an incubator. Someone would refer to us as a sort of junior merchant bank model. And what that means is, essentially we take capital from the market and we seek to get returns on that capital through our balance sheet by investing it wisely, in our case, in typically early stage mining assets. And we seek to then crystallize that value and monetize it. And by so doing, we hope to unlock the value in our portfolio for shareholders. So we're not a mining company in the traditional sense. In other words, what we're not doing is taking an asset or some assets and seeking to turn them from discovery all the way through mining development into actual production. That's not to say we wouldn't want to own producing assets or anything in a particular part of the life cycle. The point is that we seek to add value to these assets while they are in our portfolio, and then we look to sell them on and monetize those positions going forward. So there are other examples of companies that do what we do, but as I said, we're not traditional mining company in that sense. So when I think about a peer group, really, it's quite difficult to sort of, pin us down in that sense, which is why, I like to try and get investors focused on our balance sheet and what we're doing very specifically. And that's how I hope that, that we're going to be judged in the longer term.
Okay, because it is a fascinating idea that, you're not miners, you're just accumulating assets and then crystallizing and as we know, IPOing them or returning value for shareholders. But when I was on your website, there's a whole host of different resources and countries and just areas that you're targeting. In your shoes now, you've come in, clearly you've got an objective of trying to get them out there. And some of the materials naturally, I think, are selling themselves just with direction of where the world is going. But you've got I would say, 10 plus sort of different materials or resources available. Can you talk us through some of the projects or even just what you've got on your balance sheet?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, I really always enjoy this particular question because, it allows me to pay tribute to my predecessor, Paul Johnson. I mean, he has built an absolutely world-class collection of assets. And that's, what we're enjoying as a business and what is now my job to monetize and realize the value from. And what Paul really focused on was essentially two things: safe jurisdictions where investors can feel confident that we understand the mining rules and the regulations and so on, and where, on the whole, you don't tend to get nasty surprises. And secondly, in commodities that the world wants or needs, or that investors feel comfortable owning it. You sort of referenced that. The clue is slightly in our name. Power metal resources. We're very focused on the commodities that are in the decarbonisation cycle. So when we look at uranium, for example, we've got a major set of assets which we'll talk a bit more about in Canada, and that's very typical of the model. Uranium is very much in fashion. It's an extremely important commodity, and we've got our assets in and around the Athabasca Basin in Canada, which is the number one address for uranium.
Promising,
obviously
very,
one of the safest places you can be. So that's number one. We've also got some excellent assets here in Australia. And part of the reason I'm over here this week is to help Tristan market the First Development Resources IPO, which I'm sure we could talk a bit more about. We've also got some great gold assets in Victoria. I'm going to be popping in there next week to go meet with our exploration manager and have a little look at what's going on there. And we hope to IPO those licenses starting, I hope, later on this year. But looking wider across the portfolio, if we look at also in North America, we own 26% of a company called First Class Metals, which is listed in London. They're focused on base metals and precious metal exploration in Ontario. We've just recently IPO'd Gold and Metal Resources, where we retain a 62% holding. That's focused on tungsten and gold in Nevada. We have a couple of smaller investments also in North America, including 30% of a great silver asset called Silver Peak Resources, where we hope to really progress that later on this year. Moving across, I mentioned Australia, so First Development Resources I mentioned, that's essentially uranium, rare earths, and lithium, but also with some potential gold and copper. New Ballarat, I mentioned those gold licenses in Victoria. But then our third major sort of geographic pillar is in Africa, where we've got 87% of an asset we call the Malopo Farms Complex. And that's a very large license area, over 1,700 square kilometres in Botswana, which is prospective for nickel, copper, and PG mineralisation. Now, we've done 2 diamond drill programs. We've reported that to the market. And I think most of our investors are aware that we've got a proven geological model. And in the case of Malopo, what I'm trying to do there is to look for a strategic joint venture partner to take that asset on. It needs more money spent on it. It needs a lot more drilling done. But we want our shareholders to continue to realise value from that. So we're going to look for some kind of strategic JV earning kind of arrangement. We've also got a little bit in Tanzania. We've got 35% of an asset called Haneti, which is also nickel, but also some copper and PGEs. We're a minority shareholder in Kavango Resources, which I think a lot of your listeners will know about. And there are a few other little sort of bits and pieces in the portfolio. We've got a small resource fund, which we hold a few shares in. So there's lots of pieces to it. Certainly, and it is a bit difficult to get people to focus on what's really important, what are you really going for, and everything. And I think what I would say to people is, look, we've got the IPOs, gold metal's already done, First Development's on its way. That's going to be done soon. Those 2 companies will stand on their own 2 feet, if you like, and they will have their own sort of reporting mechanisms, obviously, and we'll become more sort of passive investors in that sense. Malopo, we spent a lot of money on, and we've made great progress. That's going to be a very big focus for us to move on. One I forgot to mention, which I should have mentioned, sorry, is a project called Tati, which is also in Botswana. Now, this is an 8-kilometer long golden soil anomaly where we've done a lot of work and recently put out some results. And there's more work to be done there, and which we're going to be reporting to the market. But I know it's something investors are very interested in, and it's a very important project for us. So that just adds to our Botswana assets. But for me, really, I think the big prize, and I think where we're going to be talking a lot over the next 6 months or so, is our uranium assets. So we've got 17 licenses in and around the Athabasca Basin. Now, this, I think listeners will know, this is the number one address for uranium. These are early stage. In some cases, work hasn't been done on these licenses for many years. But we've done a lot of work, obviously acquiring the licenses, staking them out. And we're going to be initiating a major exploration program starting this year. And I can't say much more about that at the moment because, we're pending an announcement on exactly what we're going to do. But, over the next, days and weeks, we're going to be putting an announcement out, which will give investors an idea of, what are we spending? What are we looking for? When are we going to hear about it? What can we expect to judge you against? What are our expectations? And I really want to set, expectations right for that one, and deliver some very good news. So that's going to be a big focus of what we're doing. We're going to, as I said, we're going to spend some money there, and over time, obviously, we will look to monetize that. We are at the moment looking at some options for how to maybe monetize a small part of that. We've got a couple of licenses which we're provisionally or conditionally vending into a small vehicle, which we are examining whether or not we want to list. We're just sort of testing market conditions on that. Again, it's something we'll be able to talk more about going forward. But it's investors, I think, have already been told about what we call uranium energy exploration, or UEE. So we're looking at our options for that vehicle. But I think the bulk of the project needs quite a lot of work. Needs to get it up to a level of understanding of the geological model, which we'll do obviously through some geophysics mainly, and then we'll start making decisions on how we deliver the value to our shareholders, and how we seek to monetize that.
Well, I mean, there's a hell of a lot to cover there, and I think you sort of nailed it in saying that Power Metal Resources has their hands in so many different pots and in so many different resources. And I mean, that leads me into the question of, you said prioritizing, and at the moment, uranium, I think, goes without saying that, yeah, there is really a clear direction. I mean, looking at the movements within that commodity, there is clearly a price movement towards the upside. I mean, I'm always terrible at judging where these commodities goes, given the last handful of years, but you'd say, given the tailwinds of where the world wants to go, clearly that's got an agenda and needs to be taken into consideration. But I mean, in your position here, I mean, where do you allocate your main focuses? Because you've got so many, and I mean, maybe it comes into the fact that you've got a whole group of people surrounding you that can really take lead on certain projects and drive it. But I mean, run me through what goes through your almost daily routine of organising this.
Well, that's a great question, Ben. And look, it does sound like a tremendous amount. I mean, but the reality is, the secret to any business like ours is always great people. Okay.
Yeah.
And, we've got a fantastic team, both at the corporate centre, in Farnborough, but we also have a very, very strong board, very experienced guys who are used to assessing projects and financing businesses of this nature. So, I've got great support. Also, Paul Johnson, I'm very happy to say, is still with us as a consultant, and it's a great help to me, and is a great source of advice. So we have a lot of help in that respect. But in all the project areas, the secret is to have good teams on the ground. So we have strong contractual relationships across all of our projects, and strong partners where whether we're the majority shareholder, the minority shareholder, we're very close relationships with all of our partners. There's regular reporting structures, regular updates. So so we're very able to keep in touch with what's going on. Typically, you set a program in place, you monitor its progress against set objectives, and then you report those to the market. And we're very, very conscious that shareholders need to be kept informed, and they need to have regular dialogue. So channels like this are fantastic for us.
Yeah.
To be able to talk directly, effectively to people, it's really helpful to set the strategy out. But I think just in terms of kind of as it were workload, I mean it's spread across a great group of people, and but we try to keep our costs fairly light. We're a fairly capital light business. In the sense we don't carry a huge balance sheet of cash. We have obviously a growing balance sheet of assets naturally, but we're not sort of we're most certainly not a lifestyle company in the sense of raising a lot of money and not doing very much. We deploy our capital when we have it, but I think it's very important for people to understand that we're running our business almost like a sort of corporate finance boutique in a manner of speaking. So it's about allocation of capital. And it's about saying, look, what in our portfolio is going to generate the best returns, and therefore, where do we really sort of focus our attention and efforts? And I think we've got a great balance. I think we know the assets that we have very well. Some of them are very long standing in the portfolio. We obviously know the geographies very well, and we've got some excellent geologists and strength right across the business. I mean, one thing that I think is also worth adding is, we obviously seek to IPO businesses, and we've just done that with Golden Metal. We're about to do that with First Development, but the guys involved in that are still part of our group. So we all help each other with sort of our various expertise, but also our costs. So we share between us. We all share the corporate office costs, and we all work for each other. If you sort of it's a very efficient model from that point of view. I'm very conscious on cost, and I know that investors want to hear that, but we genuinely are. I mean, we don't travel unless we have to. We don't we don't hire consultants that we don't need. We're very conscious that investors have trusted us with their capital, and they expect it to go into the ground.
Yeah.
It's not to go on sort of corporate overhead. It's got to go into exploration, and that's what we're very focused on. And we did a raise recently, just in the last few weeks. We raised 2.7 million. And Rick Rule in the US and some of his investment followers were also able to back that. And Rick's given a really great endorsement of the business through his investment. And he's very keen on the merchant banking model. He's made a lot of money in it in the past, and he recognises that the parent in this context contains a lot of inherent value. And if you can communicate that properly to investors, if people can get really comfortable that when I give you £1 of capital, your track record shows what you're going to turn it into, and I think we can do that. Then when the market catches up, when we have better conditions for junior mining, the shares can do very well. So, it's obviously fantastic for us that he's validated our model in that way, and we're delighted to have him as a shareholder. And I'm going over to his symposium at the end of July, where we're going to be talking directly to his shareholders, his investment followers. And telling our story, with them. So the secret to delivering a higher share price for people is not just delivering good news on the projects, although that's obviously the key. It's about bringing in new shareholders. It's about people wanting to buy the shares in the secondary market, and that's what we're very focused on. So as much as we spend time, sort of looking at projects and assessing new things and recycling the capital, we spend a lot of time marketing the story to investors, and that's, I suppose, hopefully, where my background can help a little bit, in terms of understanding what investors are looking for and how to deliver, I hope, a simple message to them.
Well, I mean, Rick Rule has a proven track record. He's got a huge following, and I mean, it's a massive tick of approval to have him come on board and share that. And I mean, the one thing that goes through my mind just after speaking with so many CEOs and even just hearing what investors say, there's clearly two sides where some investors just want to focus on certain commodities. And is that one of the major barriers that sometimes you have in communicating that? Because I know there's definitely guys that go, I just want to have gold. I just want to have my lithium. And is that a real tussle to negotiate around?
Yeah, it can be, certainly. I mean, I think what I would say is, if you're looking for, a pure play lithium story, in Australia or wherever, we're not the guy for you. I mean, that's clearly. Although what we do seek to do, obviously, in the case of, FDR, First Development, that is a very strong lithium asset in Australia as a manufacturer, although it's got other things as well. We do, through our spin-outs, we do offer people the opportunity to take more specialist approaches. And as I mentioned, with the potential transaction in uranium, that will give investors, admittedly, a small but a pure play on early stage uranium exploration. But we are a portfolio. We're going to remain a portfolio business. The idea is, obviously, as I said, you want to monetize the assets and deliver those returns. But you also got to recycle that capital, and so we're constantly looking at new things. And we're in a good position where, because I think Paul has built a great portfolio, he's developed these great relationships. We're starting to really see the benefit of the sort of disposal program, if I can put it like that. We're starting to see some really good opportunities come our way. People see us, I think, as a good shareholder to have. We have very strong commitments with our disposals that we have hard lock-ins on the stock. We tend to, we don't, obviously you can't make firm commitments that you would never sell shares, obviously, but we want to give the strong impression that we're a good shareholder to have, that we can be relied on to support the business, support further raises, and this kind of thing, and because it's in our interest to do so. It's in our interest when we choose an investment to stick with it in the long term and to see it go through its various sort of value creating phases. So it's just that we get it off our balance sheet so that the cost is borne by the shareholders of that individual company, but we stay as an investor, so our investors will continue to benefit. That allows us to run the business on a capital light basis. So yes, I mean, look, it is a portfolio, and I think the kind of investors I think that would like the story are people who want to see this kind of broader bet on the commodity markets. We talked about the decarbonisation point. We tick pretty much all those boxes. People who like gold, they can find that in our portfolio as well. Silver, obviously, as I mentioned, and I think we're well positioned for a general recovery in junior mining. If you are absolutely dead focused on one particular commodity, then we can offer you pieces of that in the portfolio, and there will be more to come in that respect. But yeah, but we are fundamentally a portfolio business.
Well, it summarizes it, because when I was saying the commodities that you're targeting in the portfolio cover almost everything that we're hearing we have shortages of, or there's this looming supply demand issue. It goes without saying that there definitely are traditional investors that just have their certain commodities that they want, but when you're looking at that spread, you could say you're happily winning because it's got everything that you could possibly dream of in that regard. But I mean, you're emerging into this role now. I mean, I'm imagining you've got a lot of projects and news coming out over the next 6 to 12 months. So what are your objectives now that you've inherited the mantle position, and what's your drive and objective for doing or taking Power Metal Resources further?
Well, I think in terms of the news flow we're going to be generating, I mean, you're absolutely right. There's going to be a lot, but what I want to get across to people is, it's not just a question of generating news. It's generating news, with the highest possible impact, which is why I think when we think about our RNS announcements, I want those to have the absolute maximum impact. So I want to use it, not what I wouldn't say sparingly, but I want to use it for when I've really got something
to tell.
Yeah. And what we tend to do is we put out an RNS, and they often can be very technically detailed because they're usually talking about drill results or whatever. But I like to back that up with doing some media. So having conversations like this really help to explain what have we actually said, what does this really mean. So as I said, we're going to embark on this program in uranium, which we've talked about. That's going to generate some news. It's going to generate some, firstly geophysical results, but that's going to narrow down some drill targets, and we'll be able to talk a lot more about that. As I said, there's we hope to make an announcement soon on the plans there. So that's going to generate a lot of news. I've got the Malopo and Tati businesses, which are the Botswana ones, where Malopo, I hope to be able to get a strategic joint venture partnership, which we've also talked about. Tati, I think we want to do a little bit more work, and then again, also we want to look to find someone who can partner with us on that. And then, of course, the forthcoming IPO. So first development we're doing at the moment, New Ballarat, we want to get underway later on this year, and then UEE, as I mentioned, we're looking at our options there, and we hope to be able to take that forward as well. So there is a lot of news of lots of different types. Some of it's going to be, as it were, corporate news. We've done a deal in an asset, and some of it's going to be operational, sort of exploration news. And what's important, I think, is that we get it right from a communications point of view, set expectations for what people can expect to hear, and obviously deliver, hopefully in excess of those expectations. but deliver that in a clear and understandable way, so that all of our investors, can feel comfortable, with what they own and why they own it.
And I mean, already it's a huge portfolio, and I mean, I'd highly recommend listeners to go to the website and have a FOSIC, because there's plenty of content on there. But I mean, the $1 million question is it looking to expand? And I mean, are those conversations happening inside? I mean, you've sort of got, as I said, a lot on your plate already, but I can imagine you've got an objective that you're constantly looking to add or even remove things from the portfolio. So what's happening in that regard? Or you've got your next 3 to 6 months, you're pretty happy, but naturally markets are constantly evolving. Who knows what opportunities sort of just emerge?
Yes, no, that's right. And I mean, obviously, I've got to be pretty
Careful
about that. But what I can say is, we get approaches all the time. And well, I'm extremely fortunate with the guys I've got, in the business, that an email can come in and say, here is an asset in a geography that suits you, which is in line with the kind of things you're doing, where there's an opportunity to either to acquire it or to take a stake in it or whatever. And I can say, guys, have a look, and they turn these things around very, very quickly. So, we're in a great position to assess opportunities as they come in. Also through, the network we've got. I mean, we've been having some great meetings here in Perth, talking with various capital providers on FDR, but, talking a bit more widely about other things we could do with the portfolio. Whereas we expand our network here and elsewhere, these conversations, evolve, and people look at, well, we could do a deal with you. We've got a shell. We can put it into that. We can list it. We can do it in Australia. We do it in London, whatever. And these are very fruitful conversations, which create a lot of opportunity for our shareholders.
Understood. Yeah, because it's, again, there's so much going on, but clearly, you've been brought in to communicate the direction, and I think it goes without saying, I keep referring to it, that all the commodities have a play in the future of the world. And you said it earlier, they're in safe jurisdictions where shareholders can feel confident. I think, well, I know you look around to certain other areas, there's been a fair bit of news out of Chile with the nationalizing. You've seen market reactions to that, and knowing that you're in safer jurisdictions is 100% a tick of approval. But I mean, where do you see these areas going? I mean, do you naturally, uranium we've talked about, but where else do you see some of those commodities really having a tailwind going, and again, giving Power Metal Resources a good opportunity?
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly. We've talked about Malopo. It is potentially, this is a world-class nickel asset, and we've had a lot of interest in it. We've had various meetings with mid tiers and above of companies that could potentially look at it and do a deal with us, because it's the right commodity, and it's in a place where you can really do business. It's a great country to operate in. So I would say that's pretty high up the list. And obviously lithium. We've had a fantastic response to the meetings we've done on FDR with the lithium assets that they've got there. If I think about gold and metal, for example, the tungsten asset, Pilot Mountain, it's a highly critical commodity in the defense industry. This is in the US, and it goes without saying where they don't want to buy their tungsten from.
Yes,
this is something that it's the right thing in the right place at the right time. So. There are a lot of variables, here. I mean, there are no geographies I would necessarily rule out, but we'd obviously have to be comfortable that we can do business there.
Yeah.
And that, if the timing's got to be right, the asset's got to be right, and obviously, the value opportunity has got to be right. And that's the most important thing. When we look at an opportunity, we've got to look at this and say, on a reasonable time frame, which we don't specify, but, on a reasonable time frame, can our investors expect that they can make money here, and that is fundamentally what we're about. My job is to deliver for the shareholders, and ultimately for them to make money on their shares. Now, all CEOs will say this. You can't control your share price, and you shouldn't seek to, obviously. But what you can do, control is delivering on what you said you were going to do.
Yeah.
And if you do that consistently, and you're clear about what the model is, and you deliver on it, then hopefully, over time, and certainly in good market conditions, the share price will take care of itself. And I do believe that we will do that. I mean, we're very conscious that a lot of our shareholders have frankly they've had to take a lot of pain. I mean, and in all across the sector. I mean, they bought shares higher up. They've been asked to dig deep for more capital raises. We because of the model, obviously from time to time, we obviously have to go to the market and ask for capital. I mean, we've just done a big raise, and that means that we won't have to do that for a while. But you can never say never. That you're never ever going to do it again. So it's important that we deliver. On that capital, and I think I know that we're doing that. We just want the the wider market to acknowledge that, and that's going to come through finding new investors in the shares, as I mentioned. So, but I do appreciate very deeply that shareholders have put trust in us. That it's taking for some of them it's taken time, and I do say to them, look, please be patient. Better conditions are around the corner. I strongly believe we're in the right commodities, in the right areas, with the right projects, and when a bit more liquidity returns to these markets, I'm sure the people will be well rewarded.
Yeah, and it's been a tough time for a lot of shareholders, no matter what size of holding you've had. I think it's tested a lot of people's emotions and psychology, and you'd like to say that during the bad times, I've touched on it so many times, and so many top tier investors have. The bad times are where the fortunes are made, and it really is about sticking to your game plan, holding true, and if you find a company that's executing what they say they're going to do, then that's where you want to be prioritizing your capital. But it's been a bit of a crazy world. It still is. I wouldn't say it's happy sailing yet, but you just know that the way that these markets flow is that there is eventually going to be that positivity return, that sentiment that comes back, and we have seen it already in a lot of aspects with how materials have been playing out, and that feeds back into junior explorers and smaller projects, and then to your mid tiers and so on and so on. And it's that it's gonna happen. It's not a matter of if, it's when. And I think that's where Power Metal Resources has clearly a great list of projects in incredible jurisdictions and a lot to do. And as you said, you're incredibly busy already, and you're up to full speed on everything. But for listeners that want to learn more about Power Metal Resources and even the subsidiaries that you've got, because you named a few, and I've spoken with a few of the CEOs throughout my time hosting this show, but where can they go to follow the company and stay on top of what you guys are achieving?
Well, we've got some great resources on the website. So powermetalresources.com, we've got, a number of things. Obviously, you'll find our corporate presentation, but you'll find a full breakdown of each asset, each geography. We've segmented it, but so it's easy to find. So if you're looking via country, you can find which country. You prefer to look at via commodity, you can do that. You can go on a project level. We give great information on each project, so you can find out what we've been up to. Obviously, our RNS library is fully up to date, so you can find all the recent announcements on that. We talk regularly to the market, so we do lots of media, so you can find resources there. But also, what I'm going to do a lot more of is presenting at conferences, for example. Attending some of the mining conferences. I'm popping in to one in Melbourne. Obviously we were in one in London recently. I go to the Indaba in South Africa every year, and that's a great opportunity to meet people face to face and talk about the story. But fundamentally, I mean, look, I'm available. If people want to email in and ask questions, we're very happy to engage with that. We turn those emails around very quickly. We do respond to any questions, and obviously, within the regulatory constraints that we have, we seek to answer as fully as we can. We're happy to talk about our projects, as much as people like, as much as people want to. I'm planning a lot more site visits. I've kind of you to say, I've got up to speed. I think the next leg, from my understanding of the assets, is to really go out there on the ground and meet all the teams, individually, and to go and kick the rocks, as they say. And I hope to be doing a lot more of that over the next few months. So that'll also give us the opportunity to talk directly to investors about what we're seeing and what our sort of progress is. So I think as a business, we obviously take our communications extremely seriously, and I think we're pretty good at it. And we hope to obviously always seek to improve, and we're always very keen to hear people's feedback.
No, it's been an incredible chat, and you said it before we started recording. You haven't been to Perth very often. You said you don't like to travel unless it's a necessity, but hopefully when you next come to Perth, you'll be able to sit down with me and update me, because naturally markets evolve all the time, companies evolve all the time. There'll be plenty new additions or just news within Power Metal Resources. So thank you for taking the time to speak with me on the show today, Sean.
It's been great to be here, Ben. Thanks very much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Market Bull podcast. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to like and subscribe. You can follow the Market Bull on our socials at Twitter and LinkedIn by searching the Market Bull. You can also subscribe to our newsletter on the website by visiting www.themarketbull.com.au.